Hey there, welcome to the Learn of Dylan podcast. I'm Dylan and I'm so glad you're here. In this podcast, we chat with experts and insightful individuals to help you master the 3 keys to a better life. Number 1 is becoming a confident communicator. Number 2 is mastering movements. Number 3 is improving how you think. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and let's learn something new together. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Welcome back to another episode on the Learn of Dylan podcast. Today I'm here with Matt again. So Matt has been a strength and conditioning coach for the last 15 plus years. So I've got him on a few times just talking about lots of different things around fitness, around training, around lifestyle. So I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into training, like misinformation, things that he wish he would have learnt sooner, or incorrect advice that we've all been given by coaches, by health practitioners over the years, and things that, you know, me and Matt have both done, but we've come to learn that's the incorrect way of doing it. So thank you so much for joining me again today, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. Might as well get straight into it. So the main sort of topic we're going to talk about today is just things that Matt knew he learnt sooner, or just around sort of misinfo in the fitness industry space. So let's go back when you first started training, when you first started coaching. So we'll talk about both.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you've learnt, you know, along the way? Let's just start with something easy. So common cues. So the whole, you know, you've got to pull your shoulder blades back. Let's just talk about some common cues first and see where that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest ones are going to be, pulling the shoulder blades back and down, keeping your spine or your back is usually the term straight when performing almost anything, and then screwing your feet in the ground. Externally rotating essentially your legs while squatting. Those are like shove your knees out.
Okay.
Those I think are like the big 3.
Yeah.
That just stand out the most. Which one do you want to start with?
Let's go with the first one. Give us a breakdown of why, you know, we shouldn't be pulling our shoulder blades back and down.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first I'll kind of talk about, at least this is my thought process, kind of what I've come to the conclusion as to why or how that even got started. Right? And I think personally, I think a lot of these cues kind of stem from when people aren't able to perform an exercise or movement. These cues are put forth to either help mitigate maybe discomfort or pain during the exercise, or just to help somebody perform it better. Quotations. With the shoulders back and down, I know for me that was given to me by somebody when I had injured a shoulder. This was before I was coaching. This is actually right about where I started realizing that I need to go learn for myself. But I had a really bad shoulder injury, problems and issues, and I was told, the certain exercises I was performing that was causing, irritation during. I'd be told, pull your shoulders back and down. Fix your shoulder blades in this position to better stabilize, quotations again, to stabilize the shoulder. So I think that's what a lot of these cues are, to better stabilize positions of the body. But what we're really doing is we're locking joints into these positions, maybe for the sake of moving more pain-free, or to have better stability, whatever it may be. But I think that's where it stems from. And so I think it comes from a good place, but the problem is it's completely contradictory and counterproductive to what your shoulder blade should be doing during any arm or shoulder movement, right? The shoulder blades themselves, they're free gliding, free moving joints that should be moving over a rib cage freely when we're moving our arms. The design isn't to stay in a position and then go move the arms, because you're actually then in fact limiting your total amount of movement, right? So I even saw a post actually the other day where someone was talking about pulling your shoulders back and down when you're doing a face pull, because it
Mm.
allows for more range of motion. And if you actually start with the shoulder blades protracted, that you're actually going against biomechanics. This was from somebody who has a big account, but obviously hasn't studied biomechanics, because the idea would be if you're starting in a pulling position, your arms are out, your shoulders are protracted, that's fine. They're going to retract as you pull back and go where they need to go. So there's no limitations, and they're moving freely as they should. So that means the shoulder is going to move optimally, whatever that is, depending on the person. But it means that you're going to get the most normal movement of it, right? So, um, what we're really doing when we're pulling our shoulder blades back and down is, one, we're limiting the total amount of tissue that we can actually challenge, because
Mm.
we're completely neglecting protraction, which happens in a lot of pulling or pushing exercises. We're reaching, we're coming back, we're reaching, we're coming back. And so you're limiting your mobility, number one, even if it feels better to you. And number two, what most people end up doing when they pull their shoulder blades back and down is just shoving their sternum forward and compressing their posterior rib cage more, which in turn hurts your shoulder mobility overall, because now you're getting rid of the dome shape you should have in the back for your shoulder blades to move over freely. So it's like this counterproductive thing. It might feel better to you at first, but all you're doing is shoving yourself further away from like an ideal function or a normal function.
Mm.
Um, and most people are already shoved forward in space, like stuck in extension through the spine. And so
Mm.
that cue is just shoulders back and down. But what most people do is just shove their chest forward and up, which is just, you can
Mm.
feel when you do that. It might look like good posture or whatever, but all you're doing is just compressing the back of your rib cage, which will limit your shoulder mobility.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, that's my biggest problem with it is the shoulder blades are just, they should move freely during movement. Don't think about your shoulder blades. Let them stretch all the way forward on a pull. Let them come back as they're intended to. If you want to emphasize a little squeeze at the end of the pull, a little push, at the return, fine, that's fine. But really, I say just forget about your shoulder blades and just do the movement. Don't focus on trying
Mm.
to pull them back and down. And it just doesn't make sense from a mechanical standpoint, and it doesn't make sense from a stable standpoint as well. If you're looking for stability, it's just not how the shoulders really function.
It's funny you say that because the powerlifting community, it's all about pulling your shoulder blades back and down, like when doing your bench press, because they talk about that's
Yeah,
how you obviously create stability, which makes sense in some ways, but yeah, then it really confuses you when someone like yourself says, "Oh no, it's not good for you." So could you talk a little bit about, because a bench press is a very, very common exercise a lot of people do, and they've been told, okay, I've got to pull
yeah,
my shoulder blades
yeah,
back, I've got to stick my chest out. So would you
yeah,
encourage them to try, like, say if they love doing the bench press, would you encourage them to
yeah.
try a different way? Like, can you expand on that?
The bench press is the same thing. Why do you need to pull your shoulder blades back and down? The question I would ask anybody is why, and no one's going to give me like a legit answer. They're going to give me some bro science answer, right? It's because
Hmm.
that's just how it's been done for years. If you're powerlifting, you have to understand this is the easiest way to look at it. I'm not going to say it's the right or wrong way. The way that power lifters bench, most of them, especially what we see now, it wasn't as common
Hmm.
before, but what you see is people that want to lift a lot more weight than they can. And so
Hmm.
you're minimalizing the range of motion you have to travel if you're sticking your hips as high into the sky as possible, lifting your back completely off of the bench and
Hmm.
pulling your shoulders back and down. Your bench becomes from this to this thing where you're just doing this little motion, so you can lift more weight. And I think that's ultimately why power lifters do what they do is, and you just look up a video of somebody bench press powerlifting. Their range of motion is so small because of that hyperextension arch that they all perform, lifting the
Hmm.
body off of the bench and just essentially having your upper back on the bench. Why you would pull your shoulder blades back on a bench, I can't see any reason where that benefits you, at least long term. Maybe it allows you to lift a little more. I think that's why most people do these things, is because they feel like they can do the movement better. But a question
Mm.
I would ask somebody is why do you have to do that to perform that exercise better? Why can't you just
Mm.
bring the bar down and push it back up? Why do you once again have to focus on your shoulder blade? If your shoulder blades were moving as they were intended, um, like just freely, you wouldn't even be thinking about your shoulder blades. I would argue that the reason most people that have to do that is because they're already so compressed in their back and they're so shoved forward in space, their sternum, is that that's where they're already stuck. So that's where they feel stable.
Mm.
So
That's a
the
good
problem
point.
with that
Good point.
is it may allow, yeah, it may to perform that activity, but in
Mm.
the long run, all you're doing is pushing yourself further into a pattern or posture that you're already kind of stuck in. So I always think of longevity when I'm exercising, no matter what the
Mm.
application is. I think of like, okay, like what's the intent of this movement? And am I sacrificing it? What's the diminishing return? Powerlifting is like, we'll call it a sport. I don't really like to call weightlifting a sport. I don't think it is. But let's just say, for the sake of it, for people to get an idea, sports aren't good on our bodies in many, many ways. That's just what it is. I'm not going to sit here and deny it. I'm not. This isn't to just distract people or discourage people from doing shit. But like, I'm going to be a realist. If you're gonna come to me and you're thinking about getting into combat sports, you want me to help you prepare your body for combat sports, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm going to give you tools to help undo a lot of that stuff, but nothing I'm doing is going to prevent an injury. Nothing I'm doing is going to guarantee that you're not going to have some kind of negative return because of the nature of the sport. Sports,
Mm.
especially contact sports, they're hard on the body, and they all come with a lot of learning that we're just doing constantly. It's like
Mm.
there's no bad posture other than the one you spend too much time in, and that's sports. Most sports, if it's a throwing sport, you're throwing with one side, rotating one way only all the time. So you get really good at going that way, but now you can't go the other way, and that can be said for anything. So yeah, it doesn't really make sense to do something for the sake of the sport to me, but I do understand that, like, if you are a football player, or you're whatever sport you're an athlete, then that's where we just say, okay, we understand what this comes with the territory, and I'll do everything I can to kind of balance things out. But we understand that, like, if I'm a pitcher, I'm probably gonna have some shoulder or elbow issues, but that's different. That's like
Mm.
1% of people. Now the common gym goer that's participating in things and doing it as if they are an athlete, because if you're bench pressing, but you're bench pressing like a power lifter, and you're not a power lifter, like you're not competing and making a living at it, you have to understand that it's not ideal for your body to extend your spine excessively, just push through your spine as much as you can, pull your shoulders blades back, and lift as much weight as possible. That's just not ideal. And I'm going to probably get some hate for this, and that's okay. But so what I would say to those who are bench pressing, if you are bench pressing like a power lifter and you're not a power lifter, stop. Why are you doing it that way? The other side of the coin is, if you enjoy it, your happiness is way more important than anybody else's opinion. So continue to
Mm.
do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But if you're having problems from it, or you're having discomfort, well, that's just it. There's always going to be a point of diminishing return when you are putting excessive stress on the body. Weightlifting can be great for us, but if done incorrectly, it can have its issues.
Yeah. I'd love to touch on like, I guess, people doing certain exercises from a already extended state. And this is something that I've probably
Yeah.
learned is it's just about gaining more awareness. So a lot of people could be training
Yeah.
out there, and they're just so used to how their body feels, they don't know that they're in
Mhm.
extension. Like they don't know that they're
Yeah.
performing exercises with bad patterning because they've been doing that for the last 15 years. So that's
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
having a coach is really important, because they can point out and be like, look, you should be, doing this, and this should be expanding, and this should be doing that. Otherwise, you just continue training, things break down, and then, yeah, just gets worse from there.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then the
So
biggest
it's
problem is because I don't want anybody to, like I don't speak in absolutes, so I'm
mm,
not saying to not perform extension while exercising. What I'm saying is if all you do is perform everything from a hyperextended state, then you're probably only going to be able to do things from there. Now, when you need to flex your spine or you need to protract your shoulders, you need to do other things, or you're wondering why your mobility sucks. It's because you don't get into any other positions. So your body,
mm,
move it or lose it. If you only move a specific way, um, then that's going to be the only way you can move well. And
mm,
so once again, everything has its point of diminishing return, but this isn't a anti-extension. I grapple, I do combat sports. We need to, wrestlers walk and bridges, I mean, they're super extended. It's part of the sport. You need it, but you got to practice the other side of the point. So if you do a lot of stuff in an extended state, make sure you practice on flexing the spine as well, protracting the shoulder blades. Just make sure you're going all directions, not one.
yeah. And for those that don't know, can you just give a really simple breakdown of what an extended state is?
Yeah. So if we just look at our spine is, I like to call the spine the core because it is the deepest thing in our body, our torso, right? And everything that surrounds the spine, everything that moves the spine are the core muscles. Okay. Our spine's functions are extension. So think of arching your back, right? Flexion, right? Rounding, rotating, and then side bending. Okay. Those are the functions of the spine. And the spine itself, is the only joints in the body where flexion and extension are actually the primary function, whereas every other joint in the body, rotation is the primary function. So it's very important that our spine can flex and extend.
Mm,
Um, so when you're stuck in this extension, just think about it. You're stuck. Your shoulders are usually pulled back. Even your shoulders can be completely forward. People think they have kyphosis and they're still extended because their spine itself is stuck in extension. Easiest way to simplify this is if you sternum, right, the chest plate, whatever, right there at the bottom of your pecs, that bones, when you're overextended, you're stuck in it, that sternum is pointed up. Basically, you're shoved forward. So anybody can do
mm.
this that's listening to this. If you're just sitting down, just take your sternum and push it forward and up. That's a hyperextended state. Now just think about
Perfect.
being
That was
stuck
great.
there.
Yeah, that was great.
You're
Awesome.
stuck there, you're compressed in the back and you're flared in the front. So that's
Okay.
hyperextended.
Awesome. So we might as well jump into. I think we have spoke on it before about like deadlifting with a flex spine, or would you rather talk about? I think we haven't touched on the screwing the
Well,
feet into the ground.
yeah, I think we should talk about that because everybody squats, and I think that
Yeah,
this is something that most people have probably heard at some point or another.
I was definitely teaching it when I first started coaching because that's what I got taught is to
Yeah,
screw your
same,
feet into the
same.
ground. So
Yeah,
yeah, can you break down, why we shouldn't?
yeah. So, once again, let's go kind of the root origins. I don't know the exact first person, but I can tell you where I learned it and where it got polarized, right, or popularized, and that's from Kelly Starrett. And I'm not throwing any shade at him. I think if anybody knows who he is a physical therapist that owned one of the first CrossFit gyms here in California, and he came out with a book called The Supple Leopard. I think anybody that was calling themselves a functional coach is which I did when I first started, because I mean, like I said, my training lens was like rehab and helping people move better. So I thought, oh, functional training, that was catchy. But he really polarized that. And so with that came like all these cues that he put out. And I think as him being a PT, he found that doing these things, and I think he's now even gone back and spent him like, okay, like that's not right. But a lot of people are still buying or just coming across a book that's 14, 15 plus years old, and they're reading this book and they're doing what says in this book, and that's one of the cues for squatting. It is screw your feet into the ground. So you basically, what all you're really doing is you're externally rotating. So it was rotate your knees outwards. You're externally rotating your femur. That's really what you're doing. And with that, your knees are going to drive outward. And for a lot of people that weren't able to squat well, they're able to squat better, or they're able to squat deeper. So once again, this was a cue that allowed people to do something that their bodies couldn't actually really do. But hey, here's a way to work around it, and allow you to load more weight and allow you to do the exercise. The problem was that it didn't address, just like pull your shoulders back and down, it doesn't address usually that issue that people have in the first place, which is why they're even doing this. And I think you can back this when I say that people usually drive their knees really far out because they can't squat deep otherwise. I think you were one of those people, right?
Yeah. So
Right.
I was
especially longer
oh,
limb
go on.
people.
Yeah,
I was
100%.
just saying, especially people with longer legs. Yeah, drive my
Yeah.
knees out. It's the only way to squat deep.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely.
So, to elaborate on why it's not a good cue is because, going back, if you're doing it just purely because someone taught you or told you that's just how you do it, that's one thing. If you're doing it though because it allows you to squat deeper, that allows you to squat with less pain or discomfort, whatever it may be, stops you from falling backwards or whatever things were happening when you're trying to squat. The problem is not your limb length. Morphology plays some part, but that's not the problem. The problem is you lack rotation internally or externally, right? Because if we break down the mechanics of the squat from the pelvis to the knee to the ankle, all of these have to go through internal and external rotation from start to finish. You're going to start in an externally rotated state as you're coming down to about 60 degrees, and then from 60 to 120 degrees, I'm talking about the hips, so your hips flexing, right? So just to get to 90, you have to have internal rotation at the hips, some amount, a good amount. And then external rotation for that last, 60 degrees. And then as you come back up, it all changes. When people typically lack internal rotation, which is more commonly an issue for most people than external, at least in my findings, you're going to be one of those people that can't squat past 90. Your butt's going to either shove back or your heels are going to raise. Your ankle dorsiflexion is going to feel like it's actually the problem, and it might be, but that's more times than not the issue, that you're lacking rotation, and a lot of the times it's internal rotation. So here's where the problem comes with shoving your knees out, screwing your feet into the floor. You're once again fixing your joints, your femurs, the big thigh bone, into external rotation. So now when you go down into the squat, you're not allowing joints to internally rotate, which you need to do because that's how you produce force. There's also the other side of it where people fearmonger knee coming in on a squat, knee valgus.
Yep.
And what people have to understand is knee valgus is normal. Watch any Olympic weightlifter. Internal rotation is how we produce force. There's a difference between your knees collapsing and your feet collapsing than the knees coming in at the bottom of the squat when you're pushing back up. That's normal. Okay. So it has to happen. External rotation has to happen to some degree. Internal rotation has to happen to some degree. And just because we don't see that happening in a squat just looks like this straightforward sagittal thing. The thigh bones, the bones below your knees, your feet, they are internally and externally rotating to some degree. And when we fix ourselves into one way, you're not going to be able to move into that other way as well. So once again, it may be serving you now to perform the exercise, but it's not serving you down the road because it's not, once again, addressing the reason why you have to do that. So if you have to foam roll your thighs out for 20 minutes every time you have to squat, sit on a lacrosse ball, do all this stuff just to squat, maybe you want to address what's really happening. And of course, the best way to do that is work with a professional and actually get assessed and figure out why you can't just squat with your knees going forward over your toes. Because that's how I teach the squat. I teach it very simple. Okay. It is simply just shove your knees forward over your feet. If your feet turn out naturally a little bit, that's fine. That's okay. Make sure your knees drive over those feet. That's it. It's a very simple cue. Focus on your foot pressure, which is inside heel, big toe, or tripod, pinky toe, big toe, heel. Keep that foot pressure, drive your knees forward, and the rest of the body should self-organize as it should during a squat. But the squat doesn't need to be any more complicated than that.
Okay, so just to touch on that again, so just make sure that we're pushing through our big toe inner arch, yeah, when we're coming, just for people that don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You just think of it like this: you got big toe, pinky toe, heel, right?
Yeah.
Maintain that tripod pressure when you're coming down. I say the most important thing is the big toe heel, so kind of your inner arch pressure. Focus on just maintaining that pressure and driving your knees as far forward as you can without the heels obviously losing the pressure or lifting up. And that's it. And if you can't squat to a depth you want, it's not that those cues aren't right for you. It's that you have to obviously restore some relative motion somewhere within that hip, knee, ankle that you're missing. But the answer isn't shoving out. Just focus on your foot pressure, the tripod. Very simple. Once again, big toe, pinky toe, heel, and drive your knees forward. And if your feet need to turn out a little bit to squat, that's fine. Let them kind of go where they go, but still drive your knees forward.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we might wrap it up today. We'll make it a quick one. I felt like today went really well. And so we touched on two main points. So obviously why you shouldn't be pulling your shoulder blades back and down, and then why you shouldn't be screwing your feet into the ground. So then on the next podcast, we can focus on another couple of common cues, and then you can expand on them further. Now, how's your sort of online coaching going, Matt? Do you have any spots available at the moment to take people on?
I have 2 spots. Yeah,
Yep.
I have 2 spots. I don't take on a lot of online. I max out at like 8 to 10. 10's kind of pushing it. But I do have 2 spots right now. And so, yeah, anybody wants to jump on that, take advantage of it.
Yeah, so I'll put your link in the Spotify at the bottom. So yeah, feel free to reach out to Matt. He's very helpful. He will help you out. He definitely opened my eyes to a lot of things, which has taken me on the journey where I am right now. Yeah, awesome. Was there any final things you wanted to point out, Matt?
Yeah. Question everything. Question what I'm saying and question what everybody else is saying. The amount of followers a person has on social media does not validate their expertise or knowledge. I think that's really important. I think people need to critically think more. We are in a point in time where we have so much information readily available, and we live in an era of influencers. And where normal people you wouldn't even pay attention to now are polarized, and you have to be careful with just taking people's information. Could I say take what you hear from me, and then question it if it doesn't feel or sound right to you, and do some research yourself. There is enough stuff out there for you to get a better idea, but just taking the word of somebody without questioning it, I think that's a big problem, especially within fitness. And so don't do that. Question everybody and everything, especially when it doesn't feel right.
Yes. Yeah, listen to your body.
As well. Be open-minded as well.
Yeah.
That's another thing that's it.
All right. Well, I'll just stop this, Matt, and we can continue chatting afterwards. And until next time. So, hey, before you go, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to these episodes. I hope you did gain some valuable insights on your path to becoming a confident communicator, mastering movement, and improving how you think. Now, remember, the journey to an enhanced life is a continuous process, and we're here to support you every step of the way. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback does help us grow and reach more listeners like you. And if you do want to follow me on any other platforms, I'd recommend checking me out on Instagram and Facebook under the handle Learn with Dylan. And feel free to shoot me a message, as I'm always open for conversation. Now, until next time, stay curious and keep learning. Enjoy the rest of your day.